Hi, my name is Nancy Moran. I'm a progressive Democrat who ran for Congress in the 5th District in the primary. And I'd like to tell you something that I'd like everybody to know. All of you can do what I did. You can apply to be a candidate with nothing more than $1,000 and filling out a form. And right after you do that, everybody in your district will know that you have become a candidate. Oh, you have to be 25, but that's the only requirement. At any rate, any of you that want to say something, you want to get out there, you want people to hear you, you can do it. You can do it yourself. Unfortunately, when I decided to do it, was the very, very last second, and I was immediately deluged with invitations to speak everywhere in the district, and with tons of questionnaires to fill out for everyone. And I did the best I could. I rushed around and did the best I could. However, the best I could wasn't quite good enough. I did, however, come in second, and my campaign cost approximately $6,000, and that was fundraised. It wasn't my money. So I just want to share with you that running for Congress, for U.S. Congress, is not a difficult thing to do. All you need to know is a lot about politics, a lot about how you feel about the issues that are important. That's all. And $1,000, and I think you could write that off as an expense if you wish to. I didn't happen to do that, but you can. Joe, would you like to say something about how your campaign went?
My name is Joe Walsh, and I ran in the 3rd District against Earl Blumenauer. And the reason that I ran was nobody else would step up and do it. And I truly believe that the Democrats have to be challenged from the left because they keep moving to the right and they won't hold this administration accountable. We've been fighting for over 4 years for impeachment. Now everybody says, well, it's a little bit too late. Well, last week I woke up and there were warships on the way to the Black Sea. The United States Navy is now in the Black Sea. So it's not too late. We're here today to support the Laughing Horse book store. We believe that they perform a vital service for Portland. We don't see a lot of other candidates here or any of our politicians. Only when they need our vote will they show up. And we have to say to them, be afraid of the voters, because they're not. They take us for granted. They say, where are you going to go? Are you going to go vote Republican? No. So where do you go? Well, we're going to go with independent candidates. That's what we're going to do. It may take 10 years, it may take 20 years, but the Democratic Party is dying. And if they don't watch themselves, they will be dead in a decade because they will not stand up for the Constitution. They will not stand up to Bush. They will not stand up for the violation of law. And they have to be replaced. And the only way to do it is what Nancy said. Citizen representatives have to stand up. It's not that difficult. If we could do it, you can do it. Did we win? No. But we were the first up the ladder. We were the first ones to try to take the castles away from the Democratic Party. And we made it possible for you to run. You have to get up and run. You have to challenge them at every town hall meeting. Don't let them get away with this stuff. They do what it's called the Washington two-step. They will finesse you with language, and you will walk out of there after 3 hours wondering what the hell they said. Don't let them do it. It's a yes and no game. Do you support this war? Do you support the occupation? Do you support new drilling? Do you support a real investigation on 9/11? Yes or no, Congressman? Period. That's what you do. So we're begging you, please step up.
There's one thing I'd like to add that I think perhaps had a lot to do with the fact that with no name recognition and so little exposure, I was able to come in second. And I noticed as we went along that my opponents were all using my points. We began to sound like magpies from ancient old cartoons, except in one area. I was the only one of us that talked about impeachment and the necessity of impeaching these two criminals and probably Pelosi too. I actually looked into whether or not we could do something like a citizen's arrest with Congress and throw out the whole mess of them, because they are as guilty as Bush is, because he's guilty of so many impeachable offenses and they're not doing anything. And Congress, the Constitution says that they are as guilty as a president who would be king if they don't step up and with articles of impeachment, etc. But at any rate, I think the point that I was making that was the most important, and it wouldn't have been to the winner of that primary, was the need to impeach. And yet the Democratic Party keeps telling us it's too late, it's not important, it's not necessary. They'll be out of office soon. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. On the last day he's in office, Bush can pardon everybody who's ever been in his administration, including himself. He'll just write himself a little signing statement, and that'll be that. But I'll tell you that a lot of Democrats that are representing you believe that it'll just be all right to let them have their time out and so on. Got it.
Just one last thought. Nancy Pelosi on The View, national television, looked at the camera and said, "Did Bush commit crimes? If somebody has evidence, please give it to me." She has been chased around on her book tour now by Code Pink, trying to give her the evidence. They've been arrested. They've been thrown out. They've been ridiculed. They've been pushed around by her security people. All questions have now stopped on her book tour. There's only certain people that can get into her book tour. Did that sound like Bush? Damn right it does. Nancy Pelosi has violated her oath of office. She knows that crimes have been committed, but she's involved. We don't know how deeply she's involved, but we know she knew about the torture and did nothing. She knew about the eavesdropping, did nothing. As a matter of fact, was taken on a tour of the torture chambers over in Iraq and said, "Are you doing everything you can?" Or that might have been Jane Harmon. I may be misquoting Pelosi. They're all in this together. The American people have to understand that we have a corrupt government from top to bottom, from Bush all the way down to Steny Hoyer, all the way down to Emanuel, all the way down to Pelosi, and down to Blumenauer. It's all corrupted. And we have to take it back or we're going to lose it. In my day, we're going to lose the Republic.
Well, I couldn't agree with what Joe has said more. He's absolutely right. I'm from California originally, and I came up here 3 years ago, and I was just absolutely delighted to find that there are all these people like Joe and all the rest of us being we, the people, that are we're still here. We're still here. Maybe some of us are in a coma, but I think we're going to have to wake up. We're going to have to wake up. I've told you how to do it. Just you go to the Secretary of State's office and ask for an application to run for United States Congress as a congressperson, and they'll give you one. And you don't need anything really fancy except that $1,000 check, and to be 25. Thank you for listening.
Hey guys, what are you doing? Why are you doing this?
This represents a blow against the fascist corporate state that we're living in. And unfortunately, computers are a part of that. Although this is part of Free Geek's efforts at recycling, so this is actually completely good.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Do you feel better?
Extremely relieved. A little bit.
A little bit. Well, if you don't feel really good, do it some more. You stand at George Bush's face down there. Yeah! Yeah!
Oh, hey!
Hey!
All right.
Car road!
Car road!
He's
All right.
enthusiastic one of the
All right, that was good.
Okay.
And now clean it up.
Yeah. Now we gotta clean up capitalism. Well, my name's Tim Calvert, and I'm here with my friend
Kathy Seitz.
Kathy Seitz, who, and we're at the Portland Iraqi Solidarity Committee's Iraqi tea and Turkish coffee booth. And this committee here, the Portland Iraqi Solidarity Committee, has been dedicated to the proposition that solidarity between people across borders is possible, and that the current neocon administration's effort at demonizing Arabs is something that we must oppose from the beginning, and that's why I'm here. We've, in this culture, we've been manipulated into thinking that Arabs somehow are the enemy, Muslims somehow are the enemy, and that we must somehow kill them in order for our freedoms to be preserved. All that's just a bunch of hokum. We've been manipulated into a war in Iraq, manipulated to a war in Afghanistan. Possibly we're being manipulated into a war against Iran. Really what we need to be doing is cutting our ties with Israel. We need to be pulling out of the Middle East, recognizing the Arab people as a fraternal group of people that we can do business with, have done business with, will do business with in the future. And we need to make a clean break with the foreign policy objectives that have been going on in this country, both Republican and Democrat. It's such a lousy deal that we've got going right now that we have Obama, who's just as prepared to attack the people of Afghanistan as John McCain, that slimy, Alzheimer-ridden jerk who the media is his constituency. Why? Because if anyone actually heard the dude speak, they would realize he was completely incompetent. So I'm just out there, and I'm sure I'm being monitored by the authorities that be, but I figure it's better to die on my feet than live on my knees in this country. So we have to speak out. We have to speak out against what's going on. Kathy?
Okay, well, I right here. Okay. I was wearing a peace T-shirt earlier today, and as I came over here, I was thinking to myself that you can't wear a peace T-shirt everywhere or flash the peace sign, and that it's important to do those things where you can do them. So that was my thought as you were talking there. We were also talking about the book 3 Cups of Tea recently. Tim said he hadn't read it yet. It's a new book, but it takes place in Pakistan, and it talks a lot about the local culture and gives you real feeling for the warmth of the people in the outlying regions near Afghanistan and the traditional cultures there. 3 Cups of Tea. I can't remember the author, but it was published last few years.
I just want to keep talking a little bit about my work with the Portland Iraqi Solidarity Committee. I've been working a lot with a woman named Zahara, who is from Baghdad, and I just want to tell a little bit of her story just because it's illustrative of how screwed up the American foreign policy has been in Iraq for as long as it's been. Zahara was born in Baghdad. Her father was a utility executive in Baghdad. Saddam Hussein was placed into power by the CIA in about, was it 1980? Something like that. And, of course, Americans aren't super aware of the history of Iraq, but the short version is the CIA wanted to make sure their guy was in charge. This has been their common pattern throughout the Middle East. The Saudi Arabia royal family is an American client. The Jordanian royal family is an American client. All the little tiny Gulf states are propped up by the United States. And so too was Iraq. And Saddam Hussein was brought in, and he assumed complete dictatorial powers in about 1980. And right when he took over, he insisted that all of the high-up bureaucrats in his government join the Ba'ath Party. And Zahara's father refused to join the Ba'ath Party. And so shortly after he refused, he was assassinated. Not only was he assassinated, but Zahara's brother, who was in the civil aviation as a pilot, was arrested and put in Saddam's secret underground prison for 2 years, and then transferred for 8 years or something like that to Abu Ghraib. Finally, Saddam Hussein ran out of being the perfect American client. Why? Maybe they wanted a war. Maybe the war profiteers in the American system said, let's just backstab Saddam Hussein, even though he's been our loyal client, including waging war on Iran, including cracking down on his own people, the Kurds and the Shiites in the south. Even though he's been doing such a great job, we're going to sucker punch him, have him invade Kuwait, and then later on we're going to invade and overthrow him and destroy the country of Iraq. Now, fast forward to today, which is what has happened. We've invaded Iraq. We've destroyed the country. Baghdad is now being walled off. In fact, if you go into Baghdad right now, into some of the neighborhoods, what they've started to do is what they've done to the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. They've started to erect tall concrete walls all around these neighborhoods. And so when you go into Baghdad, they're now saying, oh yeah, we live in Little Gaza, because that's what it's starting to feel like. People are trapped in these ghettos inside Baghdad. Refugees, there are 5 million refugees from Iraq right now. 2.5 displaced people inside Iraq, 2.5 million outside of Iraq. The United States doesn't even want to acknowledge their existence. It's an unmitigated disaster. The economy's been destroyed. The infrastructure's been destroyed deliberately. It parallels the Israeli treatment of the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. The whole idea is, frankly, to drive the Iraqis out of Iraq so that the neocons can take over the country, which they're doing. So Zahara left the country, fortunately, before the war started, wound up in Jordan. Jordan is an American client state. Oddly enough, it's being supported by somebody, because in Amman, it's one of the more wealthy cities in the Middle East, even though Jordan doesn't have any oil. But, of course, Jordan doesn't really want all these Iraqi refugees, and so they're forcing them out. And so Zahara has bounced around from various different countries trying to figure out a way and a place that she can immigrate to. She made it to the United States. She's been granted asylum, has received no assistance, is having a heck of a time finding work. There's no one at this moment actively speaking out about the Iraqi refugee crisis that's unfolding. So you can have blowhards and traitors like John McCain saying things like, oh, it's working in Iraq. I guess he's referring to the depopulation of the country and the destruction of the economy. It's working. It's working. It's working for those Zionists because that's what they want. They want to destroy Iraq to the last person. So anyway, I'm here as part of the Portland Iraqi Solidarity Committee to raise awareness about the Iraqi refugee crisis, to make sure that Americans and the world realizes that no, it's not working in Iraq. No, it's not working at all. And the Americans have got to get out now. The generals have got to be put on trial. George Bush has got to be put on trial. These people have committed the ultimate war crime. It's so lame. It's so embarrassing. I'll only feel satisfied if we see a repeat of how they executed Saddam Hussein, only this time it's George Bush peeing his pants as little harpies sing all around him, and they pull the plug and he swings. Because that's the level of criminality that this administration is engaged in, and it's not only against the people of Iraq, it's against the people of America. And that's the most embarrassing part, to be an American and realize we've got a government that's working against the interests of the American people. They don't give a rat's ass if we live or die. Take a look at Katrina. Take a look at the refugees all around all these American cities. They'd just soon we died as saw another meal. So these people have got to be put in jail. They've got to be charged with treason. And we've got to get a government that's actually speaking for the people, reaching across borders, recognizing the common humanity of people all around us, and starting to live in peace instead of this perpetual war against Eurasia, or is it East Asia? Who knows what it is? Just do what Big Brother says. I mean, here we are. So I want to just say to Americans, wake the fuck up.
All right. Go, Tim. So I was thinking about a conversation that I was having earlier at another table here. They were talking about the history of police brutality, and they were saying that the police actually in this country were originally paid in order to catch slaves, and that the tradition of paying people to round up the poor and make sure that they didn't sleep in the street, and if people were unemployed, that they kept moving them along and so on, dates back to this concept of chasing down escaped slaves, and I found that very enlightening in terms of okay, that's why we see this situation today when rich people can get away with so many horrible crimes, as Tim was saying. I like something that's really doable, and I don't know how doable it is to put George Bush in jail, but I like the Fellowship of Reconciliation model from South Africa. If people aren't familiar with that, the idea was that if someone had committed a crime, that instead of just throwing them in jail or having some preconceived punishment for them, that the people who were the victims of the crime would Tim, you should be listening to this.
Okay.
The people who are the victims of the crime get together with the perpetrator and decide on some kind of reconciliation. How I think it would work if you had reconciliation. Let's say you actually had George Bush up there on a war crimes trial, and of course he doesn't want the world court to have any power, because he knows that if it did, that he would be up to trial. But if you had him there, you would have to say, well, okay, what damage has he done to the American people with his wealth, and then find some way for him to pay back. And I like that model because it doesn't just duplicate the violence and response to violence model. Too much of revolution has been about just trading power for more dictatorial power, and you always have to watch out for that in your in your either thinking about a revolution. And that was one of the brilliant things about the 60s, was the idea that peaceful and nonviolent resolutions to conflict could be found that respected people's individual rights. And of course, you can't always appeal to people's reason, and that was a part of our conversation earlier about the Taliban. Tim was saying that we should negotiate with the Taliban, for example. I don't know if you want to go off on that topic.
Yeah, well, yeah. Thank you, Kathy. Right. I mean, right now we are killing the people of Afghanistan for an extremely unclear reason. Of course, it's pretty clear to the neocons who are there and NATO as they bomb the wedding parties and continue to devastate the economy and the infrastructure of Afghanistan. Why aren't we negotiating with the Taliban? Why aren't we creating peace in Afghanistan? They don't want to create peace in Afghanistan, and it's because turmoil, disaster, and devastated Middle Eastern societies is the goal, is the actual goal of the West. So negotiating with the Taliban, even though, of course, we've done it in the past, even though just before we invaded Afghanistan, we cut a deal with the Taliban where they eliminated poppy production, and there was all sorts of cooperation about opium trade, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, that all went by the wayside after we destroyed the government there, went in. Now poppy production is back up again. Of course it's back up again because the same criminals who invaded are the same criminals who run the illegal drug trade. So we've got a situation where we have rogue, mafia, organized crime in the U.S. government running foreign policy where they are, just like the Iran-Contra affair, running illegal drugs as a way to fund the whole thing. It's all part of these elites maintaining control of key sectors of the economy and the money supply, and the drug trade is a big part of that. Mike Rupert, who some of the people may know, he wrote a book called Crossing the Rubicon. He was very big in early exploration of the true the true perps in 9/11. But even before that, his big study was in the drug trade, and it was very clear back then. This is in the 90s, that the central banks were actually laundering all the drug money. Of course they were. Where does all the money go? All these drug lords, they've got to put their money somewhere. Of course they put it in banks. Do the banks know where the money comes from? Of course they do. So we have corruption right up to the top in this society, and it's just another reason why we got to get ready. We got to get ready for this whole thing to come down around our ears. We've got to be prepared to become refugees, because that's what's going to start happening. It's going to be like Katrina, except it's going to be all over the place. Don't wait for the federal government. The federal government's probably going to come to screw you over. You've got to be prepared to leave the cities, live on food you carry, and figure out a way to make a living in a post-globalized economy. It'll be better in so many ways, but it won't be better initially. So if you're not ready, and if you're not ready to survive several waves of disaster, it won't just be one, it won't just be two, it'll probably be 3 or 4 big problems are going to rain down on our heads before we start to see some improvement. But after that, hopefully, we'll start to know something.
Yeah, so that actually loops back into the conversation we were having before we got on camera, where we were talking about, I was saying that I've been studying organic farming and gardening, and that I've been seeing a lot of hope in that community of people who are saying, yes, let's increase the number of people who are putting crops into the ground. There's a movement in Olympia, Washington called forest gardens or food forests, and it's an environmental activist who's running this, who has said just what Tim is saying, that basically we can worry about what the problems are and keep trying to do political stuff, but we need to actually hunker down and get ready for these increase in catastrophic storms specifically, which is what global warming really means. It's not an issue of the temperature going up so much as an issue of the increased catastrophic storms. So, the people who want to store food and grow food is a big emphasis, and also supporting local economies and thinking about saving all kinds of things that you might need. I mean, it sounds like Y2K all over again, but I think that was, a good practice run for us.
Yeah, I remember Y2K. I won a $50 bet over Y2K, actually. But I did want to talk a little bit about this whole global warming thing. There's a book called Limits to Growth. It was written in the 70s by Meadows and Meadows. And it's been updated several different times. It talks about how we live in a finite planet, and when you have geometric growth in a finite planet, you get these typical sine wave-like growth patterns. It goes up, up, up really steeply, tops out, and then plunges back down like a sine wave. And that the population, pollution, food production, oil production, all these different things that human culture has been doing in an exponential way are destined for collapse, because you can't have exponential growth in a finite system. Global warming has been this kind of interesting thing that the corporate media has launched and glommed onto, and of course I don't trust it. I don't trust anything that Al Gore is behind, because we all know that Al Gore participated in his own unelection in the year 2000 that brought us in this whole bullshit of George Bush. I mean, Al Gore, who should have been fighting tooth and nail in 2000 for his rightful place in the White House, instead completely abdicated it, never mentioned it again, and then picked up this whole thing called global warming as his whole big new shtick. And he doesn't even mention the fact that, he was part of allowing George Bush in the first place. I only bring all that up because there's this whole other element to the global climate that has been completely downplayed in the media, but I want to draw people's attention to it anyway, and a website. The website is What's Up With That, WATTS, with that. And it's a guy who has been following and tracking environmental temperature ratings, etc., for a real long time. And he's a very skeptical person about global warming, mostly based on the fact of his examination of manipulated data. But on top of all that, there's another detail that's on the horizon, and here we are in late August, August 24th to be precise, and this normally is a really, really hot time of year. Typically in late August, we could expect 80, 90-degree days on a pretty consistent level. Well, as you may have noticed from the background in this camera, it's raining today, and it's actually quite cool. And what now? We realize it's rained in August before, and there are always these things. But I bring this up because sunspots. I'll just bring it up a little bit, but the bottom line is there's been a very impressive correlation between sunspot activity and global temperature. Historically, starting way back when they first discovered sunspots, which was in the 1600s. Way back in the 1600s, they had discovered that there were sunspots, and they started watching the sun pretty closely. And then what happened was the sunspots went away for like 40 years, 40 or 50 or 60 years. It was called the Marauder Minimum, something like that. And what then resulted was a little ice age occurred on this Earth. And the weather got bad, as in the northern hemisphere got cold, crops failed, populations were forced to move. And not to alarm anyone, but there hasn't been a sunspot since October, and the sun remains amazingly inactive. They've been predicting the next sunspot cycle for quite some time now, and it hasn't happened. And I don't want to be alarmist or anything, but it's actually worse if it gets colder. And we may be facing that in the near term. And I don't know if they're not going to be sunspots for the next 40 years. If they're not, we're in deep trouble. And it's not going to be global warming. Now, that's not to say that we're not polluting the hell out of this planet and that industrial activity isn't still damaging us in horrible ways, because it is. And I find it interesting that instead of talking about pollution per se, Al Gore has spent all of his time talking about global warming as if that was worse than pollution. But in fact, the pollution's worse than global warming for us right now. Take a look at the cancer rates. We're poisoning ourselves to death with all this industrial toxins. So, I mean, just don't trust anything the corporate media spews out at you. Kathy, go for it.
Yeah, I think the word and phrase global warming has come to replace the older concept of pollution and other environmental ills that people such as myself and I think you too also, Tim, have been in the environmental movement for a long, long time and been hoping that it would get to popular awareness. And you know, in a way, it's good. We've got Al Gore talking about global warming, and he has gotten the issue onto the table for a lot of people. But it's almost like, okay, it's not just global warming that we're worried about, just like you were saying, and yet the phrase has become sort of like something that pries open a lot of issues for people. It's becoming the excuse, why would you want to fund more light rail, for example? Oh, global warming. So you can like just drop this phrase into these situations, and sometimes I think it's got too much power, and of course money could be spent along efforts that actually did not help. The biodiesel issue is one, for example, that a lot of people, even environmentalists, are still not aware that biodiesel
is food.
It's food. It could result in an increase in logging, for example. They talk about the use of slash left behind after logging operations could be burned and energy could be produced, but there isn't enough of it to really get a lot of energy. I'm from Southern Oregon, and we even talked about fueling a local mill with the slash from logging operations, and you could probably make enough energy for that mill for a while from the slash from logging operations. But that slash from logging operations includes things that never should have been cut in the first place, and so it's being used to increase logging, to make sales possible in the forest that were not affordable in the past, and that's just one aspect of biodiesel that is happening. And I'm talking to people all around who are like using used cooking oil and so on, and if you have some source of it, that's fine, but people need to be aware that's an issue, that it is not a real solution to the problem. Maybe it's got some temporary application and so on.